the request.
Okay, and
All righty.
okay, so we are recording. Hello, everybody. I'm Dan Winter, fractalfield.com, fractalu.com, and I'm here with two very important guests today. Jake, whom you've met before, Astral URMAH. Say hello, Jake.
Hello, everybody.
Jake is our very powerful astral shaman navigator and has important stories to tell. Today's theme is about empowering new insights into Earth's relationship to the extraterrestrial politics. And we're also joined by Jack Riley from North Carolina. Jack is amazing. He's an expert in crystals, I believe, and he's also one of our more expert users of FiRay.com. And in fact, Jack is the one who introduced me to Jake. And Jack actually, he traveled from North Carolina to Maine, and Jake was able to use the FiRay, had amazing experiences. And these guys are quite a team. And the specialty of this team is specifically a deeper understanding of galactic politics, balancing some of the things, for example, that Elena has been saying with what we see as a more balanced context, which comes from the Tegotan Pleiadian, Mari Swaru, and these, our friends here, have direct relationships to them. So this is powerful. So the way I thought we'd start here today is we'll take just a couple minutes so that you can learn a little bit about the background of Jack and Jake. You know a lot about my background, hopefully, maybe a little too much. But Jake, do you want to just say a little bit, introductions and background?
Yeah, my name is Jake, and I go by Astral URMAH. I'm part of the feline, race called the URMAH, and we are in Earth's orbit right now, kicking butt. And yeah, I work in the astral. I'm here to work in the collective unconscious, to do the shadow work with humanity and help clear the lower astral and the astral planes in order to, release the over and stringent, like darkness that's kind of clouded over this planet. So we're just kind of breaking up those dark clouds in the astral and releasing stuff. So yeah, I do one-on-one sessions with people and help them to get lucid in the astral and help them to do their dream work and even healing. So
great. Jake's presentation at Fractal U last week was so well received, and Jake is actually helping people with actual techniques for lucid dreaming and getting powerful in the astral. And and speaking of Mari Swaru Tegotan Pleiadian, it says Swaru Official is the name of the YouTube channel. But she's the one who always says, and the people that we needed on our side are, she calls them the cat people, because those cats, man, they're so powerful in the astral. These are kick butt shamans, which is why I said to Jake the other day, I was a little jealous because I wanted to be a kick butt astral shaman, but I could teach the theory, but I need Jake to do the. Anywho, but remember also one.
This is important.
Well, remember one of the funny story when Guardians of the Galaxy, that famous book, they said the reason the Sphinx is the Leonine, the lion gods, is these are quote the star elders of the Anunnaki, which again would be the cat people, the lion people, the Sphinx people, and this tradition actually is true of a major branch of the families of the galactic politics, the URMAH, who are very powerful lion beings. Look out. And the Tegotans and the Ontarians. It's the Ontarians, the Tegotans, and the Pleiadians who got together to do something about what they called corruption in the local branch of the Galactic Federation. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's do a little introduction about Jack Riley. Jack, go ahead.
Sure. I'm not as astrally advanced as Jake, although Jake has helped me to develop a little bit of lucidity together using FiRay, and I have some interesting plans for FiRay. But a little background on myself. I was actually, as opposed to most people who have had a lot of experiences as a child with astral and paranormal and whatnot, I had a pretty vanilla childhood, and I was actually very skeptical of all things different, really. My plan was to go and study physics at MIT. I had a friend who I sort of lambasted and made fun of because he was into UFOs, and a man named Stephen Greer, who you may have heard of.
Of course.
But I actually stumbled upon your information, Dan, at some point, and I was completely dumbfounded that you had a lot of answers to questions in physics that wanted and planned to try and answer as a career. And so we decided to test your theories, your mathematics, physically, and we went out and performed what Greer termed was the CE5 contact.
Ah,
And we
right.
saw hundreds and hundreds of just unexplainable wild phenomena. So much so, you know, it was far beyond any statistical likelihood of it just being, you know, satellites and whatnot, all sorts of wild things. And this was to try and prove, you know, your definitions of telepathy and an instant transmission of information,
Into the
as well as,
into the array, as it were, and the
yeah,
magnetic lines and the frequencies of the brainwave. The implosion embeds you in the longitudinal array, and therefore the DNA radio works.
yes. And we would sit and meditate. Specifically, it worked the best at a church, which was interesting. I think the church was probably over a ley line. We doused the area, and we got some good results there. I think whenever we would meditate at this church and just put out a neutral intention to see and communicate, or you know, anything of the sort with something out there, and we would always get a reaction. I only had it not work once, and that's when I went out with a bunch of drunk people on top of a mountain, and I don't think the intention was right. So that was really interesting to have such good results hundreds of times, and that really proved to me that you had a serious set of theories and mathematics to be dealt with. And that was 7 or 8 years ago. And since I've been studying it and then studying exopolitics and whatnot, different information from specifically the Taigetan contact, I've looked around, but I have yet to find anything that's as cosmologically consistent in terms of quality, content, quantity as the Taigetan contact. So
Yes. Yeah. So
yeah,
we're speaking about Marie Soireau and the Soireau lineage, currently Soireau official. Originally, it was our friend Med, who now calls herself Tim, who Soireau calls the old lady, but she's the one who knew Soireau, I don't know, 7, 8 years ago. And that's how then Gosha met Soireau through Tim Med, who at that time was communicating with Taigetans through Zen. And so we knew Tim Med and the whole Soireau story before Gosha ever heard of them, for years, actually. And for example, we had the story of Vieira, you know, the 600-kilometer long triangle, Andromedan ship the other side of the moon. They're all talking, everybody but Elena is talking about that. It eventually got to kind of wonder why. And so there was a kind of a turning point here, actually. And one of those turning points when Elena pronounced that they had somehow, quote unquote, captured Soireau because she was evil AI in the Earth's atmosphere. And like we actually believed Elena at that point. And much later, we learned the agenda for that story. And the agenda for that story is a little bit like, here is the pot calling the kettle black. I mean, who's the AI here? Oh my God. But again, I'm getting ahead of myself. We need to present the context and the background here. So I'm going to do a little 5-minute history of my background with Soireau and Simjasi. So um, my major communicator on many of these things is Rob Potter, whom most of you know. We talked even recently, the day before he died, about his view of Elena. And Rob Potter's view of Elena was that his 30-year friend, Valiant Thor, told him that, you know, Elena was sincere originally, but unfortunately, she really let her imagination run away with her. Now, recently, Penny Bradley says that Elena is full of, it's just not good. But obviously, and you know, Elena is saying her secret lover is ThorHan, and we think there's a problem there. And then she says her secret lover is Enki Ea, and it gets to be a little bit like who's imagining who here, and we need a more mature version. So we're stepping back now and realizing that we learned from Soireau story. So anyway, Rob Potter's teacher at that time was Fred Bell. very famous, wrote Death of Ignorance. And Rob Potter and I were both in Fred Bell's living room when he was building these copper pyramids and all the story. And Rob marketed those for years. During the time when Semjase showed up in his window repeatedly, actually, and he wrote many books about this, and it was an introduction to the Palladian story. So then Gosha was discredited at one time by the two Spanish girls, Estela and Cristina, which we later learned was because Estela and Cristina, the Spanish girls, actually lost their lover at that time, and there was an agenda. It's a bit of a long story, and we don't need to tell that story here. The issue of the story, here's the core of the issue. The core of the issue is that Elena is presenting a kind of, what did you call it, Jack? A Candyland version of.
Yeah, traditionally New Age sort of, I did call it Candyland, sort of a fairy tale representation of what is called fifth density or 5D.
Yeah.
In a being.
And it's a bit of a problem saying, the Federation is here to save you. You need the Federation to save you from the Siakar or the Draco, for example. Well, we learned from many other sources that Elena is, first of all, the Siakar are not losing. And it isn't that we need the Federation to save us from them. The actual problem here, and this is where we think Penny Bradley, who has hundreds of years more experience with the Dark Fleet than Tony, unfortunately. Penny likes Tony, but Penny says Tony is naive. Again, we love Tony, but anyway, but Penny wasn't just the servant on this in the stockroom, which is Tony's role. Penny was the actual interstellar navigator for the Dark Fleet, the German Dark Fleet, for 60 years and back, for a very long time. And she really has experience, and we recommend Penny Bradley. And we like her. The limitation, of course, is that Penny's experience does not include the fact that humans can be empowered out of their own bliss to become psychokinetic star navigators. Her experience is using Draco implants and programming, and it's not about bliss. But Penny's experience here is impeccable. And she says, of course, that Penny's wrong about most of this stuff, especially the Siakar story and more and more. So going back to the Swaru, Tegat, and Pleiadian story, which Jack and Jake are very expert in, that's their subject today. How do we get a more balanced view of our politics with the Galactic Federation? And as Jack just explained very well, just before we came on air, he's saying Earth's politics, as above, so below, is a fractal of the galactic politics, meaning that a Candyland view of, oh, this wonderful Federation is going to fix it all for us, whereas the Marie Swaru and the Tegat and Pleiades are being very detailed. The local Galactic Federation has problems, corruption, Etorthan corruption. And Jake has gone into great detail saying that Etorthan corruption is directly because of their embedding with the Maitre and the most dangerous AI in the galaxy. And we have come to believe that, in fact, the reason Elena's ThorHan is called ThorHan is because that's short for Etorthan. Etorthan. And if you know anything about the story here, oh my God, that's messy. And so then we might even read just a little piece from our friend Dahlia, who you've heard from Dahlia many times in our lectures, because basically Dahlia did a remote viewing, and we'll have the link here. And she said it was no problem to remote view ThorHan. And she said, quote, "I saw a gnarly looking reptilian entity that gave me the creeps." And it's interesting to me that Elena claims it's impossible for anyone to remote view her. I find this arrogance laughable. I was able to in seconds. I mean, the story gets a little bit messy. Now, all of these pieces separately would be disjointed. But once we come to see that there's a very coherent, bigger picture here of the corruption in the local Galactic Federation, because the Andromedans on Viera, for example, are having the same problem with invasive AI in the Federation via the Etorthans, and this is reflected directly. This is what we're going to understand late in this show, directly in the politics of Earth here now. We have Zionism and ruthless AI kinds of wars happening on the Earth. And as Swaru always said, the important stuff's happening on the astral. And once you figure that out, then you can understand the local politics. Well, until you got a navigator in the astral, Jake, you don't get that bigger perspective. So anyway, it wasn't surprising to us that we see that Elena, unfortunately, really got tricked earlier in her career. And Penny is very, very sure that that metal implant in Elena's skull is very, very conventional CIA V2K voice to skull technology, and that if she just put a metal shield on a little Faraday cage net, she'd find out in a hurry that the voice quits, because this is not advanced interstellar. This is local CIA well-known voice to skull technology, unfortunately, which respects how the Etorthans and the AI behind them, which Jake is going to explain, is linked to the Maitre. So then the big picture here comes in the many, many stories, which Jake and Jack are going to review here now, that Marie Soireau is explaining the local, when the Antarians, they got in Pleiadians and the
URMAH.
and the URMAH, they decided they'd have enough of the Etorthans in the local Galactic Federation corruption, literally in bed with the Earth Cabal, massively making money from human trafficking. And Mari is describing in detail the Earth Cabal's trafficking in humans. Are flying in the caves under Mexico and saving hundreds of trafficked humans, directly related to the Cabal, which is the corrupt part of the Federation, which is all the Etorthan problems. So figuring out who these Etorthans are and where the corruption is connected to, and connecting that to the Maitre and the AI behind them, which Penny is very clear is the real problem in our galaxy. The danger in our galaxy ain't the Draco Seekar. No, the danger in our galaxy is this dangerous, aggressive, assertive, intergalactic AI through Andromeda from the Maitre, who are behind the Etorthans who pretended to be ThorHan. So this gets to be a fairly messy story. At least it's colorful. So have I set the stage? I'm not sure. But now we need Jake and Jack. Please fix it. How did I do?
It's pretty close. Jack, you want to go ahead and take it away, Jack?
Sure. I wanted to just share a few forethoughts here.
Yeah.
Like Dan said, I think that it can almost be said that it's mathematically impossible, according to fractal mathematics, sacred geometry, and Dan's work, that you could have the governmental structures that you have on Earth, but also have this new age idea of sort of fantasized perfect 5D with a perfectly legal-minded and positive and acting federation up there.
Impossible.
It is truly mathematically impossible.
Not real. They got the same kind of problems we got, basically. It's obvious.
Yeah. And for people that are feeling, and this is seriously stepping on toes, and I understand if people are sort of upset at hearing this and even want to click off or just throw away all this information. I urge people to take a sort of scientific mindset and really separate yourself from the ideas that you hold. Try not to tie your ego and yourself to ideas. And I'm not to say that we are be all end all, or not to try and impose any truth, but I think for the sake of oneself, the embetterment of a collective knowledge and just generally a conversation, it's really healthy to just try, and especially, and this is what you do in science and academia, you find what you disagree with and you compare and contrast it with what you already know and see if you can arrive at a better conclusion for the sake of yourself, and not necessarily to save what you already believe that you have. I think that's a good.
In other words, it'd be a bit childish to just believe this wonderful Galactic Federation from heaven is going to save us, and therefore, as long as we obey them, we don't have a problem. Well, no, it's a little more complicated, a little more nuanced.
Yeah.
And in fact, what I understand is now, and I think I learned this from Jake, that they believe that although Earth is very much at risk from this very aggressive AI intelligence, that in fact, unless we Earthlings ourselves learn the discrimination to know what this aggressive AI is behind, Etorthan's Maitre, that they're behind the problems of not just the galactic government, but behind the problems of our government. And until we learn that kind of discrimination for ourselves, and that's why I'm a little bit disappointed. I love Tony, I love Michael Salla, but actually for discrimination, unfortunately, I think Jake has more discrimination. I think it's because Jake has been in the astral so much. So Jake, you're on.
Wow. All right. Well, I see a lot of red flags right now, with the way things are going, and have been going, obviously. When you have somebody saying that they're going to come and liberate you, or they're going to come save you, it's the same thing as the religion. Okay. It's the same thing as, Jesus is going to come and save you, or somebody else is going to come and save you. It keeps the person in a victim mentality. And this is exactly the problem on Earth, is that humans are still in a victim mentality. They don't understand that they need to step up and take responsibility for their own actions. So that's a huge red flag right there. If you see that somebody's going to try to come save you, or they're promising liberation of Earth, and it just never happens and never happens and never happens, as far as, the astral is really my forte. And as far as what I've been seeing happening there is, well, there were Etorthan ships that came. There were 5 big battleships that came into Earth's orbit. What do you think, Jack? A couple months ago, a few months ago?
Marie described it in some detail, I think, yes.
Anyway, when they show up, the presence of these, Etorthan, of these Etorthan starships, when they show up in the past into Earth's orbit, bad things happen on Earth. So, the presence of these,
yes.
What's that?
I say historically, yeah. I think Mari and might have been Yazi or somebody in the past on the Cosmic Agency channel had mentioned that every time that the Etorphans had shown up historically was the time of either a very large social soft reset or a massive great reset, going back to the 10,000s, 1500s, all the way back into the single digits.
And then Mari is describing in detail how the Antarians, the URMAH, and the Tegatans, they surrounded one of these messy Etorthan ships, and there was a blow up. And now they've taken over the local space, and this involves the era. And all of these stories are completely missing from Elena. Why? When they're in incredible detail from our Pleiadian Tegatan sources. We need to know why. What is the big picture?
Well, I mean, I think that the important thing for the viewers to know is that this is not channeled information. This is information coming directly from space. Okay, so it's going to be, more in depth, more in detail. I mean, these Etorthan starships, well, they came into orbit. We have been following them everywhere that they go, shadowing them, the URMAH and the Tegatans especially. And they were switching out a ship with the Alcyone was coming in, and the Etorthan sent out, I believe it was 90 attack drones and targeted their engines.
The Tegatan ship.
Yes. And that was their fatal mistake. The presence of 5 of their biggest, most powerful starships can only be seen as a threat to all of us, especially as the Galactic Federation looks the other way and does nothing.
So what happened, it was cool. So the Tegatans and the Antarians and the URMAH all sent in their biggest ships so fast, it made the Etorthan's head spin, and they chopped off the tail of the Etorthan ship, and it got colorful from there. I don't mean to care.
Yeah,
I love this.
Don't mind, I'll just read through some of this of what Mari posted here. Tegatan fleet at low Earth orbit. The Etorthan battleship at the rear of their formation, closest to the Alcyone, released a swarm of 90 attack drones These drones position themselves around and behind the Alcyone in perfect firing formation. Captain Goriel, no stranger to combat, was not intimidated. He informed the rest of us of the situation. After briefing the Taigetans, the Antarians, and the URMAH high commands, then the swarm of Etorthan drones opened fire on 8 engines. The Taigetan dreadnought shuddered with impacts, but its powerful energy shields absorbed the hits. Immediately afterward, Alcyone expanded its shields in a strong electromagnetic defense burst that destroyed all 90 drones. Do you remember that the Etorthans actually fired on the ship?
Yes, the
Jack?
drones, the drones, that's what she said. The 90 drones fired on the ship, but remember that Alcyone is an Taigetan Pleiadian ship, one of the fleets that Swaru was director of as queen of this Taigetan, the content.
And a little more context around that as well. I believe the Etorphans were attempting to draw them into a legal problem. They were trying to
bait them. Yeah.
Create a situation where they would have legal precedent to kick them out of orbit via some sort of, and I think it wasn't even about that specific conflict, but it was more that down the line, as the Triad chose to carry the conflict into the Vieira to take control of the Earth's internet, and therefore sort of that's like the consciousness of the planet, really.
And so what happened?
They wanted to have the Triad illegally invade into the Vieira militarily, into a space where Andromedans had already surrendered, and therefore, if they were to do that, they would have legal precedent to kick that Triad out.
And the Triad, Jack, means Antarian, Taigetan Pleiadian, and URMAH. And what happened was that the Antarian ambassador is so expert at intergalactic law, gave the Pleiadians very good advice. And so now legally, actually, the Taigetan Pleiadians and the URMAH, they have the upper hand. And they were able to go into the URMAH, into the Vieira, the 600-kilometer triangle ship hidden behind the moon, been there for a long time, which was basically the headquarters of the Federation because it was Andromedans. And remember, the Andromedans got sucked into this. You know, Alex Collier says they're heroes. Well, they actually don't have a military, and they've been having problems being sucked into this AI problem. In fact, Med described the Andromedans on Vieira having to vacate the joint at least once because too much of the AI got in there. So, you know, the Andromedans were in the middle here. Anyway, the point was that when the Triad that Jack is referring to, Taigans and Antarians, got inside the Vieira, they discovered the real controls are not inside the Vieira. Oops. They're inside Saturn, which is where Helena says the Anak Empire controls it. I mean, anyway, the plot thickens. Sorry, I interrupted.
Yeah, and no worries. Yeah, and something that was just released in the last couple of days is Mari's thesis about how, just like we said, the governmental structure of Earth is a reflection of the Federation. Well, the Earth's internet structure is also a reflection of a greater, to put it simply, sort of like a quantum internet that relies on muon transmission, instantaneous transmission.
It's like longitudinal interferometry. It's literally longitudinal interferometry, which was, you know, instantaneous global communication was based on coherent longitudinal interferometry. That was Mueller global scale. We know a lot about that. And so there is a galactic internet, which actually contains, inside it is embedding the little small, tiny little Earth's internet, but.
And I think, and she basically made the point that in the same way that the Earth's internet controls the majority of the Lyrian consciousness here, she believes that muon-based quantum internet up there is also in a position of control over a lot of the interstellar civilizations.
And susceptible to AI issues, which is where we're going.
Yes.
Yes. I think we need to hear more from, I think that was great, Jack. I think we need to hear more from Jake. But before we do that, just briefly, Jake, I think people need to hear just briefly how you came to be working so closely with the Taigetan Pleiadian Swaru and, is it Sophia?
Yeah, Sophia, who is not around Earth space. So we don't know, nobody knows where she is. She's played in hide and seek as far as I'm concerned. She loves her astral games. She loves jumping timelines and making little tweaks here and making little tweaks there. And we all believe that the positive changes that have happened in Earth's orbit, we now, the triad, the Antarians, the URMAH, and the Taigetans right now have Earth space under control.
Yep.
And it's huge. It's made a huge difference in
big.
I just don't see anybody spraying any chemicals in the sky anymore where I'm at and where other people's are. I mean, I have clear blue skies here now, but I seen clear blue skies in the astral, and that's a rare occurrence, and I spend a lot of time there. I spend countless hours there. But how did I come to be, such a big follower of this disclosure and such a big believer in this disclosure?
Taigetan disclosure.
The Taigetan. Well, see, I'm an URMAH, and the URMAHs chose Mari to actually bring forth their disclosure as well. So the Taigetan and the URMAH disclosure are one and the same. They're together. We incarnate back and forth, Taigetan, URMAH. And there are some other races in there, like the Engans too, and some of the other races there that are really close. But how did I just believe? Why do I believe so much in the disclosure, and why do I want to dedicate my life to getting this information out there? And it's because, yes, I was in the astral, minding my own business, when this little girl, Sophia, came up, and she had her katana with her, and she gave me a big hug. And I was looking at these orphaned children and these missing children in the astral, because everything that happens in the astral is a direct reflection of what happens on Earth and vice versa. And she came up to me and we started talking about what we were going to do and how we were going to help these children. And that was the beginning of everything. That was the beginning of all of my telepathic communications with her, the beginning of me developing an advanced astral group called the Astronauts. The first place she sent me was to the pyramids. I have a book coming out about all that stuff. It's in the works right now. All of my adventures, all of the team's adventures are going to be coming out in a book soon. And it's all focused around Sophia. I truly believe she brought everybody in that group together and sent us on missions. We followed our dreams. There's a lot of lucid. Once you get lucid in the astral realms, you really start to see things for what they are. Once you gain that discernment, and you can tell friend from foe, and you can tell consciousness from not consciousness, and you can tell a positive AI from a negative AI, because the regressive AI and the Etorthans, they use overlays. They do have access to the astral. The AI is in the astral. Positive AI is in the astral. Negative AI is in the astral. I mean, everything is happening there. I wish people could, I wish people could step in and see for themselves, honestly.
And just a few pieces here. Who Jake refers to as Sophia is kind of part of the royal family of the Taigetan Pleiadian, the Swaru lineage, etc.
Yeah. So Sophia showed up first from a different timeline. Then I believe it was Athena that showed up next. Is that right, Jack?
You can see their pictures and
then it was Mari showed up from another timeline. So you have these nexus point soul extraterrestrial girls that are both URMAH souls and Taigetan souls showing up at a key point in Earth's history right now.
See,
we are at a tipping point.
Thank you. All their beautiful pictures at swaru.org. I didn't mean to interrupt, but just pictures of this. This is and there's hundreds of films there. There's a background here, but it's just to say that once you learn the astral discrimination here, you realize these guys have been telling the truth. And unfortunately, Elena, that's a problem.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I wish that the starseed, I wish the starseeds in my community would believe more in their astral experiences and in their telepathic experiences, because Sophia has been communicating with us telepathically and through the astral. I've got tons many reports of, you know, people being lucid in the astral and meeting Sophia, and Sophia either giving them something or telling them to go somewhere to hold a frequency to a specific node or a power place. You know, she's gritting us out. She's the commander. You know, Sophia, and she, yeah,
In the picture, she looks so young, but and
yeah, but she has
and,
lifetimes and lifetimes and lifetimes, and she's aware of so many timelines. Her consciousness is so expanded. She can have a physical body, you know. She was born in hyperspace, so she has super abilities to walk through walls and time travel and bilocate. And all of this information and all of this knowledge and all of her wisdom can be found on Cosmic Agency on YouTube and
Swaru.org.
Swaru Official too.
Swaru Official is the YouTube channel. Swaru.org is where the pictures are. So, and there's hundreds of films here.
And the transcripts, all the transcripts from, I mean,
Very
hundreds
detailed.
and hundreds of videos.
Very detailed. And
yeah,
thousands at this point.
I must say that when Marie Swaru tries to talk about physics sometimes, well, you know, but she's actually a political kick butt ruler that sends in these, you know, 1,000 times more powerful than a SWAT helicopter down to release hundreds of trapped people in the caves under Western Mexico, run by the corrupt part of this cabal and the Federation. And she knows that's directly related to the Etorthan problem, and she's in there being the kick butt director. I mean, these take out in Palladians, they're impressive, man. I think it's colorful.
She is an Irma, you know, Mari is an Irma soul at her core.
Yeah.
And the thing about Irma souls is no fear. And that's another thing. When you go into the astral, you can't have any fear. You're gonna face things that you don't want to face. But that's doing the work.
We Scorpios, we love that kick butt approach. I'm sorry, Jack, you were going to say something, weren't you?
No worries. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, but let's go back to the big picture, Jake. So the big picture is that
the big picture is.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I'm saying there's a lot of people working on the problem right now.
Yeah.
It is so complex what's going on, because you have all of these star seeds waking up, and we're expanding our consciousness. We're seeing these multiple points of views. We're going into the astral. We're seeing all of these different timelines and different, you know, and different beings that we're in contact with. And we're trying to put together and understand the big picture.
Yeah.
And the big picture is, it's complicated. It is complex.
Well, so for example, Marie Swaru is saying that they suspect the higher echelons of the local Galactic Federation, administrated by the Andromedan headquarters in Vieira, the higher echelons of the Federation, in fact, seems to have problems with this corruption AI infestation, in peril of the fact that they just let the local Etorthans, which we now know are tall grays, probably related to the Maitre, which Penny seems to be very clear are the real problem in this galaxy. The real problem is not the Siakar. Sorry, Elena. No, the problem is the Maitre. Penny got clear on that. And Jake explained a little bit more about that, actually, that although the...
Yeah, let me just pipe in for a second.
Go ahead.
What we have going on when it looks like the Andromedans and the Arcturians are not actually at fault here, but there is a psychic hostage situation going on with them. These Etorthans, through this is my point of view. This is what I believe. I believe that the regressive AI from Saturn is controlling the Etorthans and using the Etorthans to mind control thousands of races.
People like Elena, unfortunately.
Thousands of races outside of Earth. Well, in Earth orbit. Some of them in Earth's orbit, but I'm talking about thousands of races. And now, because of Jack, you could pipe in on this, but because of the connectivity of the AI through all of the, you know, just like we have an internet here, they have an internet up there where all the civilizations are connected as well. So they're getting fed all the same lies that we are. The Galactic Federation has erased history in a lot of areas, and literally confused us and changed history. They want to turn, Toth into a bad guy.
Yeah, that's right. That's the problem. Exactly.
And it's just like, yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of that going on. So if you think that, our media is mind controlling us to believe certain things, it's happening in space too.
Yeah.
It's not all love and light up there.
Marie says this repeatedly, that the higher Galactic Federation communications are so biased and prejudiced and corrupted. And now she's coming to realize that was directly related to the local Etorthan problem. That's why we started there and suggest you do a little homework before you believe this Candyland story. And so
Yeah, there's so many videos about that. So many different situations in which they've performed very similar actions to what we see on Earth. One of them being, and just to be clear, Jake and I are not direct representatives of the information, but and also on the channel, there's a lot more than just exopolitics for people that are interested in paranormal and all sorts of different topics. You can go and find all sorts of information there. But specifically with what you're talking about in terms of the behavior of the Galactic Federation, there was one of these topics about, I think, space pirates and breakaway civilizations that were under the control of the Federation. And they would basically like neuter a civilization. The Federation would hire them out under the table to harass and sometimes commit something near what could be called a genocide on a civilization that is near interstellar capability, and force them into joining the Federation. So there's all sorts of examples. More recently, the Alfretan Centauri have been transporting, or had been transporting, a lot of CABAL operatives and replacing, I think, 6 or 7 different high councils in the Pleiadian cluster, with one by one taking out, assassinating, or taking members of these high-ranking members in these councils and replacing them with CABAL operatives. And
it's like the Tegatans found out that their government was being replaced, literally being shape-shifted out by the corrupted part of the Federation, which we now know is Etorthan, aggressive AI dominated. So it's a big part of this Federation.
They've slowly been able to create a legal case, a legal precedent, to take out what can be legally considered a separate civilization that inhabits this Earth. Mari recently put out a video about DUMS and the underground infrastructure being almost 3 times as large as the structure infrastructure, which is pretty wild to think about. But there was a recent problem where the Alfretans transported a couple of Earth-based Black Ops, like Delta operators, to Taygeta to they actually successfully assassinated 2 Taygetan military members, and forgive me for not remembering their names.
And basically, also
one of them
kidnapping too.
Yeah, one of them had under their floorboards a collection of data and evidence against the Federation, in the form of creating this legal precedent. So now they've followed through and finally have started. They've been able to legally
prosecute,
intervene, and treat this civilization that is here on Earth with us as a separate legal entity where they can genuinely go against them, because they've been, with help of the Federation and the Etorphans and ultimately that intergalactic AI, they've been kidnapping members of the Antarian race, of the Taygetan race. They've even been caught taking people from pre-industrial civilizations on different planets other than this one, and that is just utterly abhorrent and in direct
prime directive.
The prime directive, exactly. Yeah. So slowly over time, and I wonder you know, a lot of people were getting a little frustrated because it seemed like the Taigetans were naive, letting all this stuff happen.
But
But, you know,
now
some of it
already
was but yeah, but now I think you can see
We
over
were
time
building
that
evidence. I mean, we've been building
exactly.
evidence. The Armors have been building evidence. We're doing
Yeah.
reconnaissance and infiltration,
Yeah.
both in the astral and in the 3D, but especially in the astral. This is where we're doing the infiltration, all this stuff. I mean, Earth right now is a problem, but the problem is also spread out to other planets. I mean, Venus has been invaded. If people don't know about Venus, Venus is more of a tropical paradise and better
yeah,
suited for life
that's
than
Rob Powell.
Earth.
Yeah.
And that got invaded, back during the
During the
Vietnam War.
Vietnam
That was
War.
the
Yeah.
cover for Venus being invaded. So we have problems on Venus. Obviously, Mars is a mess. It has been since the Tiamat Wars. Who knows what happened
Yeah.
before then? They're kidnapping people, and the Antarians and Taigetans and the CABAL. The CABAL has spread outside of the solar system, and that's a problem.
And that's a problem. And that's what Penny's. Well, first, I want to say I think there's a precedent here. There's a profound parallel that after Eisenhower got tricked by the same tall grays, we think, uh, and then those tall grays started massively shape-shifting out, body snatching the high military leaders, and the only ones that could fight this in the end were the Navy, and the rebellion in the Navy resulted in the quote unquote suiciding of Admiral Borda. But there's a whole story about the parallels of this exactly, and there's the kidnapping, body snatching. Well, where did that precedent come from? Hello, this is how they do it. They shapeshift out the leaders, and this is, but we didn't know the context until this point, actually.
Yeah.
Well, they actually can clone a leader, and then now that clone is an organic portal. And now, how do you think that clones operate? They operate off the AI. They
That's
don't
right.
have soul, but
Like a
also
board.
they're organic portals, so that a regressive reptilian or an Etorthan or whatever can mind control those clones to do whatever.
And they
And
do.
they can also incarnate into those clones.
We,
So yeah, that's a big problem. That's a big problem.
we better do a happily ever after soon here. People might get depressed. I
We're
just
just getting going.
I just
Yeah.
remind people that Jake provided instructions on how you penetrate that layering. What did you call it? A template, and
Yeah,
do it.
piercing the overlays.
Yeah, that was good
Piercing the
instruction.
overlay.
That was
A
good.
projection. It's like, Elena Danon is she's projecting. She's projecting that and accusing Mari and them of being AI, but that's a projection, right? There's a lot of projections going on. And these are all mental projections because the information obviously it's coming through her chip or whatever, but really that it might as well be channeled. It's worse than being channeled. Honestly, the channelers are a lot more accurate and a lot more high frequency than getting something through a chip. So anyway, I just want to say that this information is not channeled, and it is so detailed and in depth. And if you want to take a closer look at it, the transcripts for all the videos are on swara.org. You can go and you can do a search for it, and you can look up any subject that you want, from health to physics and science to exopolitics and the astral and
Wow,
metaphysics. It's all there.
that's great. That's
Thousands of videos. Yeah.
swire.org. Just to put a little more flavor here, Jake, would you agree with part of Penny Bradley's analysis where, actually originally when I interviewed the real kick butt shaman here, Johann Fritz, Will Nutter. So I interviewed him several times, and he's one of the few people that survived a meeting with the Draco Red Queen, for example, and knows the Black Goose story personally. It was very colorful. But anyway, he was the first one that told me that one of the ways the Dark Fleet got powerful was 300 years of backward time travel, which I don't think Elena understands at all. But so they went back 300 years, gathered all the tech they could, and they established thousands of breakaway civilizations with humanoids in thousands of places, which the higher Federation regarded as humanoid pollution spreading because of a civilization that went viral that's actually not mature. Anyway, so her story is that the Guardians, the police of the interstellar, the galaxy, now told all those humanoid dark fleet civilizations they have to come back inside the Earth cloud as humans until they can learn to get along. I thought that was really interesting. But the point is that here's another precedent of polluting along the timelines with the Dark Fleet, which, you know who I learned that from originally? William Bueller, who was talking with Thoth every day, who was the original Templar, goldenmean.info/Bueller, whose their teacher is Thoth, and they're talking about, yes, when the humans learned to time travel, they polluted their whole neighborhood up and down the timelines. Anyway, another example of this virus. Sorry, Jake.
I think it's important to, that just brings me to this. I think it's important to remember that every soul is its own timeline. So in order for, to go back and change this specific timeline, they're going to have a really hard time doing that, because, I mean, do these people even have souls? It's all about your point of attention and the soul's points of attention. That's what's generating reality. And unless two people agree, unless two people with souls agree on any specific perception, then their timelines don't cross. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Well, this relates to the story that the story that you told, Jake, when you first began to navigate the astral, and you realized that all these people are in their own little bubble, their worlds of isolation. It reminds me of people who die without coherent souls, and so they live in their own fantasy world for hundreds of years, unfortunately. Whereas the kind of dream lucidity that allows you to actually communicate with the collective unconscious requires a higher form of coherence. You described that.
Right. So I guess what I'm saying is this, is that, how can I put this? Jack, save me.
Well, I did want to leave us with one or two ideas to help people get some hope back. But so the legal precedent has been set to remove the external influence, and now, the New Age has been shouting about liberation for years, and that removing the external influence is a sort of liberation, but it is not the same kind that the New Age is talking about. It still leaves the responsibility at the end of the day, when that external influence has been lifted off the planet, for us to grow up, as you've been saying for years, Dan, and as that is obviously something that has to happen. And it is also an individual process, and there's a very good video, it's about 26 minutes long, about personal ascension that Mari made, and the responsibility that one needs to put on themselves in that individual process. And I'd like to also say, there's an idea in New Age where you can be completely and utterly vibrationally incompatible with violence, danger, and evil. And I believe, and I've seen, and it's been said by the Swarani lineage and the contact, that's a dangerous and naive concept. There is a difference between caution, the acknowledgement of danger, and the construct of the mind that is fear. And so it's, I think it's responsible for people to look at the darkness, do shadow work, and find, these things that make these people uncomfortable. If you look into that and you don't necessarily fear it, but you try to understand it so that you can move past that fear and acknowledge what could be dangerous to you in in the way of a lion, rather than simply not looking at it, which is what a concept that the New Age has pushed for years. Because regardless of your vibrational makeup in the physical body, even in the fifth density, even though the density is a gradient, like a light spectrum, you're always going to be, when in physicality, in this complex vibrational matrix, and that will include the possibility of being eaten. And if you don't want to become someone's dinner, you have to be a lion. You have to look at the problem. You cannot simply look away Otherwise, you may look back and there's a gun in your face. It is not as simple as completely and utterly controlling your vibrational frequency using your mind while ignoring the issue. I think it's much more complex than that. And I just wanted to say that, I think I've seen a lot of criticism of the Taigetan contact over the years, and one of those things was, well, it just doesn't vibe with me, and it doesn't feel right. And I think, that's okay. People can push, they can push whichever way they'd like at the end of the day. But I would be very cautious of being naive in the sense that thinking you can simply control your reality without being a lion and stepping up and defending yourself with a sword if it comes to that. Because unfortunately, in physicality, the opportunity to be eaten is always going to be there, whether or not we're on Earth or interstellar. I think a lot of people may have memories of all that unity, and I think that is a memory of an afterlife or even higher densities on the gradient scale above the fifth, sixth, and seventh, when the eye starts to disintegrate into the other and the all. And you don't necessarily have violence in those realms, but when you step into a physical body, you have this undeniable capability of compatibility with violence or evil or being eaten by something. It's kind of an inescapable consequence of incarnating into physicality, and it's important for people to
And
acknowledge
Mari,
that, I think.
Mari had that conversation too. She says, yes, we're beautiful in love and light, but we also kick butt when we need to. But
Yeah.
you were developing a thought here also, weren't you, Jake?
I've got a lot of thoughts jumping around my head, but no, we're in because I'm in the astral a lot. I mean, thousands and thousands of hours I've spent there, and we are in the best position that we have been in. This Earth is in the best place it's been in the last 2 years. We're on a positive timeline, and them, removing the external influence, when the URMAHs and the Antarians and the Taigetans took out the Etorthan ships, they removed and took over the Viera. And took a hold of Earth's space, airspace. They removed the external influence, and that is astral liberation. And let me explain why. Because in space, you starseed watching this video right now, we're getting messed with by these Etorthans in their ships. I was getting messed with. We were all getting messed with while they were here in orbit. Okay? They were targeting us. Now that targeting is not happening. Okay? Now we just have to deal with our own egregors, with our own shadow work. And now we're free to do that. So if you've been feeling a lightness, something extra, a clear sky, something extra going on, a little bit lighter, that's because something is happening in space. Something is happening in the astral. And I see great things happening in the astral. I mean, I was in the astral and I saw 3 suns, and I saw a white ring around the whole horizon. I saw bright blue skies. I mean, when you go into the astral and you see this stuff, I'm getting goosebumps right now. This is not normal. Something has changed there. Something has changed drastically, and it is rippling to Earth. It's rippling to 3D. It usually takes about 6 to 8 months. So now is the time. Now is the time to get involved. Get involved with people that are going on astral missions, that are, doing their dream work and doing their shadow work, and get into the conversations. Get into it. It's now is the time for us to just totally take advantage of this free airspace around us. Okay. So that's my spiel.
Oh, that's so wonderful. It's thank you for giving us hope. We're about we're about to get depressed. Now we're not. It's good. But then Jake, maybe you should give just a few little hints and practical examples of, well, how do people get lucid and get in the astral and get an astral mission? Little examples, like for example, when Sophie first told you you got to drop in over the pyramid because that's where the bad guys were. That was a cool
Oh man,
example.
wow, was that a trip? It took I think it took 5 or 6 people 5 days and nights, experienced lucid dreamers. 5 or 6 days. It took a whole week, a week or two, just to get to the pyramids. That's how much war and black clouds and
Astral
demonic shit.
smog.
There was a huge black dome over. I mean, it was a mess. Yeah, and that's going to be coming out in my book. It's in the works. But this happened. It was about a year ago.
So that's where the astral leverage is there. So you got to kick the crud out first. And Sophie took you right to the spot where the work was
Yeah,
needed.
we took over the pyramids. I mean, the pyramids is the spot.
That's
You
a
know,
critical
it's
leverage.
to all those aquifers underneath in the rivers and
And the
all of
magnetic
those ley lines.
lines.
That's what gave us free energy. You
That's the
know,
seed of the
I,
fractal. And that's the physics that I wanted people to understand, pyramidwirelesspower.com, which is explicitly plankfire.com. The harmonics in that pyramid are exactly a Schumann phase conjugate pump wave. I published all that at pyramidwirelesspower.com and at firecrystal.com, PHIRE, firecrystal.com. And then Elena and Dan Willis's, and they published my frequencies changed by one, and they said it's only Fibonacci and didn't mention Planck. And I was so pissed off because you cannot teach charge collapse as a principle behind global wireless power if you said it's Fibonacci and don't mention Planck. And they copied me, and that's the day that I decided, oops, Dan Willis says he's listening to ThorHan's brother. Ooh, why did he get fed crap? And now I know exactly why he got fed crap. Excuse
yeah,
me. Anyway,
I'd
yeah.
like to offer a
sorry.
The way that the pyramids worked, it was some sort of it would harness the Earth's energy, and then it would interact somehow with the clouds in the sky, and it'd create like this lightning,
Yeah.
this
Well,
this astral lightning inside of the pyramids. And that's what allowed people the main use of the pyramids was so people could astral travel,
there you go.
lucid astral travel
It's
from
because in
all
the
the energy going up to the queen's chamber there. I'm going to
in
do a video on that.
in the king's chamber, I was there. The lights went out. And in the king's chamber, the implosive capacitance means your body does not decay, which means you're more free to propagate in the astral without. But also, the phase conjugate pump wave called the Schumann harmonic series, which is almost exactly Planck fire frequencies. That's called a phase conjugate pump wave. And the pyramid was called the Hummer because those low frequencies were imploded capacitively. And by the way, there was mercury there, which functioned as a lens. And that implosion of the transverse component of the phase conjugate pump wave, called the caduceus, which is Hermes, that's what then dumped that inertia into coherent longitudinal EMF called global wireless power and the grid. And you couldn't send it or pick it up unless you were on nodes of that grid and used the right frequencies. And we published all of that, and Tesla missed almost all of that. So, because
yeah.
nobody taught the actual phase conjugate pump wave. Anyway, that's all on the website.
Saru said it was actually a secondary objective for the pyramids to create wireless power, and the first one was assisting in astral travel through longitudinal compression.
Makes sense. I totally makes
Yeah.
because that's what actually gave you leverage in the astral, was to be able to propagate there. And they said, well, if Osiris doesn't go into the sun, well, the Nile isn't going to flood on time. Well, now we understand that physics exactly. It was a launch pad into the astral. Anyway, go ahead.
So I want to put this out to the viewers, okay? Nothing is impossible. We are dreamers. And if we can visualize it and dream it up, we can make it happen. And I want to, and I hope you want to too, rebuild the pyramids. Let's get them back going. Let's get first, let's go into the astral. Let's take over the pyramids again and rebuild them. We already did that. Me and my team are already doing that. So join us, and that is going to filter in and ripple out to 3D.
I can teach the physics.
That's the way it works.
We know exactly how to tune it. It's plowingfire.com, actually, which is why Sam's Bosnian pyramid creates so much regeneration effect that 1 million people a year come there and they get rejuvenated. We know the physics. We know how to optimize, how to tune the capacitance. We know how to propagate the longitudinal array. We know why that purifies the water underneath. Tony got that for me, really. But that's why the Eiffel Tower, for example, worked to purify the water underneath. It's all about generating the propagating array of that centripetal force, which is called atmosphere maintenance. And this was all taught actually in the book Two-Thirds, David Meyer, David Percy, and they called it correctly planet taming. Now we know the physics. By the way, that's at goldenmean.info/Babylon, B-A-B-A-L.
So there's 3 steps that I'm thinking that we can do. We need to get the quartz pyramidion, the pyramidion or whatever it's called, the quartz that was covered with gold at the top.
That's right.
That's the main
157th the volume of the capstone and 157th the volume of the pyramid.
We need to put that white stuff over. It's like an insulator. It insulates back over the limestone. And then we also need electricity inside the pyramid. Oh, electricity could run it.
Well, the electricity
creates the power too. You have to have electricity.
But the electricity was generated because the Schumann cascade is almost a perfect phase conjugate pump wave. And it was so exquisitely positioned to amplify the Schumann cascade. And it's that implosion that made it called the Hummer. And so that was a natural source of inertia for the longitudinal array called global wireless power. And by the way, the longitudinal array is also named the collective unconscious, if you know any Aboriginal, for the identical reason. So that's, if you want your dream to be lucid, meaning you actually want to communicate with the collective instead of being with an isolated bubble, embedding is the solution. Isolation is not, and embedding is called phase conjugate implosion, plowingfire.com.
Okay.
Yeah, just to give people a couple of pointers. I know Jake's been lucid for his whole life, so I feel like it's hard for Jake to understand. Some of the people that like me and Dan, it's a little difficult to get there. I think Dan's been talking about what did you call it, Dan? It's not astral hygiene. You called it
astral hygiene. No, we called it astral hygiene.
Astral hygiene. Okay. Yeah, astral hygiene, taking care of your FOB, your forward operating base, or your body in the daytime. Eating well, thinking shareable thoughts.
Exactly.
Dan's got a whole program.
Right.
Exercise.
Now there is a little controversy about the diet. I think the Taigetans actually, when they first 6 or 7 years ago, I remember Swari talking about the vegan diet being conducive and helpful, but they actually did a 6-month study in their labs and figured out that the human body actually needs meat, protein, also fiber.
The Aboriginal says, don't eat your relatives. No, you do not eat pork because the DNA is too close. But, you need to actually lucid dream, connect with the fish you're going to spear the next day. And that fish decides it wants you to consume its memory. Now that's communion.
Yes. Yeah. And I know Yazi had this, there's a lot of tricks and ways that he even just go on YouTube. You can find videos about people getting lucid, but most of that stuff you don't necessarily have to do. One of the most helpful things that you can do, directly from Yazi, she said,
get a fire rate.
Well, yes, but also in your waking life, as you walk around, imagine yourself going through walls. Imagine that you're in a dream all day. And now this is difficult. This is the whole civilization is built around working and making money. This is a ridiculous concept for people that are responsible for a household. But that's the whole, that's the gig of Earth. That's unfortunately the lessons that are to be learned here. But if you have time during the day, at the end of the day, after your work or whatever you're doing, try and pretend you're in a dream and do things that are impossible to you. And eventually, if you make a habit out of that and you beat these things into your subconscious, when you dream, you will do these things. You will open portals. You will
ask yourself a few times throughout the day, am I dreaming?
That's right.
Look at your hand. Am I dreaming? Those little things can get down into the subconscious. And if you want, I'm working with people every day that have never gotten lucid before and that are getting there, getting to hypnagogic states and getting lucid. And also, you gotta get the phi ray. If you can afford one of these phi rays, get one immediately. These things create the golden ratio, and they put you right in that bliss state of mind. You're gonna be able to get lucid a lot easier with the freed up space around Earth and the phi ray. You're on the highway.
But
There we go.
Phi ray is amplified Schumann. That's what it is. So it's creating that centripetal force. And notably, also, Jake got our flameinmind.com, the brainwave, and we saw he was generating alpha cascades. And so it's the same alpha cascade to gamma, which is exactly the same as the Schumann frequencies, both of which are implosive and centripetal. And I remind you, the university studies on what frequencies trigger dream lucidity, luciddreamteam.com, actually fit plantfire.com, which is centripetal force. So get centripetal or get dead. And so the point here is that anything that enables you to get centripetal, be compressed, allows you to radiate into that longitudinal array, which we've been teaching for a long time. And thank you, Jake, for being our perfect answer.
Yeah, and if you've made it this far and you're 3 hours into this, check out my Patreon at Astral URMAH. I just started it up. I'm gonna be releasing some amazing astral stuff there, and I have one-on-one sessions that you can purchase. I'd really appreciate your support.
And you can find Jake at Astral URMAH, his YouTube channel as well.
Astral URMAH YouTube, Astral URMAH Patreon, Astral URMAH, just yeah, I'm all over the place. If you want my email, it's astralagent1111, Astral Agent with a Z.
AZ
at gmail.com. Yep.
Agent 1111 at Gmail. Thank you. But we're not going to let you go yet because we got some more questions for Jake, actually. I got some more questions for Jake, actually.
Sure.
No, so supposing somebody A wants to get involved. You just answered that question to some extent. But B, what is the connection here between the corruption in the Federation and the local corruption? For example, so if Elena was being steered by ThorHan, who was really Etorthan, and then suddenly Elena and Michael Salla are advertising Donald Trump as the savior to disclosure, hello. I mean, do we think there's something suspicious here? You know, how is the local mess going to evolve as we fix the big picture?
Well, right now, since the triad has taken over Earth's airspace and we have, freed up that space, the cabal is going to be scrambling. Okay. Now they're going to be scrambling. Who knows what they're going to be trying to do here, whether it's LA riots or resets over here, there, or wherever. Well, as far as Elena Dannon and Michael Salla, there's some serious drama issue going on between them. They're not even on the same wavelength anymore. So that whole, the whole, if the Etorthan, see, this is what happens. If it's breaking down in the astral and if we've sought out the bad actors in the astral and we've exposed them, that's exactly what, and they're falling apart there. That's exactly what's going to happen here. So the breakups and all that stuff is exactly what's happened already in the astral. I don't know if that makes any sense.
No,
Did I answer your question, or what was the question?
Well, the question was, as we look around the Ukraine war, the Israel war, and today it's been announced Israel is going to bomb Iran, and then you got genocide for months, and this all seems to have to do with the Draco history, which, if you believe Elena, Yahweh was half Draco, and therefore that's the God of the Jews, and it gets to be pretty.
So Israel is the cabal.
Yeah, there you go. Okay.
The cabal was started by Akhenaten and Nefertiti. Nefertiti was the one behind it. She was pulling, Akhenaten is Moses. So what happened was they were taking advantage of the humans, the native population. See, humans back 12,500 years ago, 9,000 years ago, Egypt was a stellar port. It
Yeah.
was a
Stargate.
starport.
Uru
Okay.
Asala means
There
Stargate.
were tons of different extraterrestrials that came here and were doing their thing, right? And they would leave and come back because it was just a starport.
Yeah.
But the reptilians were in Sumeria, and they were expanding over years and years and years, and they were, you know, they were coming into power. And eventually the Homo capensis, the long-headed one,
Doliacephalic.
yeah, from Elohi, which is, I believe it was
This is Thoth bloodline, basically. This Conehead.
So it may not be Thoth's bloodline, but it's in the same kind of realm.
It's the Grail bloodline, yes.
So basically Akhenaten and Nefertiti started to get, because they were extraterrestrials, the humans looked up to them.
Oh, yeah.
And they took advantage of that. They got a little group together and said, hey, let's, you guys need to worship the black sun. You guys need to worship the sun worship, Akhenaten, right? So I think it means golden eye. And so what happened?
Not to interrupt, but fits so perfectly with Dahlia, who is absolutely lucid dreaming these incarnations as Tutankhamun and Jesus, for example. She's crystal clear. She sees Nefertiti there administering the poison in the eye, knows exactly how Tutankhamun got murdered, who was the hero of the genetic lineage that Thoth was designing. Nefertiti was, just as you're saying, fits perfectly.
So Ramses II was a human, and he was the king. And well, you know, Nefertiti and Akhenaten, they were imposing monotheism. And the Egyptians and the people, the Egyptians, they wanted to keep the polytheism. They wanted to continue to worship all their gods and goddesses, which are basically just all of these star races that had come and helped them and gave them so much help and gave them you know, agriculture and mathematics.
Good.
You know, these humans worship them, and this is still part of the problem.
Right.
And did not worship the extraterrestrials. They worship them because they had superior knowledge and superior technology.
Yeah.
So Akhenaten and Nefertiti took advantage of this, and they started, you know, a group. And then, you know, Mary Totten, who is Swaru.
Mary Totten. Ah, yes.
Mary Totten, who is Swaru.
Half sister of Tut.
And Ramses II pushed, and all of the people of Egypt pushed them out of Egypt.
Right.
And that's Israel. Israel. Isis, Ra, Elohim.
And the title of the book is called Out of Egypt, but that's the title of the book. But it's a bloodline. And this fits perfectly that then the royal line of what was to have been taught was the attempt to make the Grail line, but unfortunately, the other side of the family took over the lineage, and so the intergenerational persecution of the Grail line, which is the Tutankhamun Jesus lineage, which is the one that specifically Nefertiti was involved in murdering Tutankhamun. Dahlia has the most incredible detail on that story. And so actually she says, this is the reason today that Egypt is finding it difficult to get out from underneath the rule of military generals, because the military generals murdered Tut. It's the same story.
Right. So what happened was when Akhenaten and Nefertiti and Israel, they were Egyptians, but they went with the monotheism. Then they spread to Ireland, blah, 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 blah. They spread to Italy. And then in Italy, that's where they started the Roman Empire. And that's in the Catholic Church. And that's the crux of the Cabal. This is how the Cabal was started. So Israel is still under the same power of the same energies, the same soul consciousnesses, and the same lineage of Nefertiti and Akhenaten. So this is the Cabal. This is the Earth Cabal. This is the problem. And so the pyramid, you know, the reptiles took over and the stellars left. And
That's right.
that's when the immersion, that's when we started using the immersion. It's like, okay, we can't go down there. They're going to worship us. So now let's go use the immersion program. So they took their med bed technology and their entertainment technology, which their med beds and their entertainment beds, they put them together and made the immersion part for incarnations.
Yeah, like the
And
movie
that's
Maitre.
how we started. That's how we started coming to Earth now to help the humans. And this is when the Van Allen bands now are very, very strong at this point.
Yes.
After the Stellars left, the pyramids stopped working. Okay, they took the quartz off the top. They ruined the pyramids, the reptiles and the CABAL, because the Elohi, Akhenaten, and Nefertiti were working with the reptilians.
Right. And where would you put that? It's a very helpful piece of the history. Where would you plug the Anak story? For example, Dahlia and others say that the Anaks were, part of the family had a Draco background, and Lil Yahweh, who was the god of the Jews, but the other part of the family, Enki, Thoth, Ningishita, represented bloodline cross with the
I
Syrians.
do know this. I do know this, that Thoth was as a stellar engineer. He constructed the pyramids. He had all of the machinery. He had the sound saws.
Yeah.
He had all of the levitation equipment. They used even hydraulics. He's credited with constructing the pyramids.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. That's Thoth.
Yeah. And there was, according to Federation records, which I don't believe Federation records all the way back then, but they say that Thoth, turned evil. And the Federation records say he turned evil and wanted to destroy us. The Federation is saying this. And that's how you come into the Anubis thing. So I really wanted to talk to Dolly and ask her what race she thinks or knows Thoth was, because the URMAH believed that he was a lupus, which is basically a space wolf.
Which would relate to the Syrian lineage, I believe, which is part of the myth of the Thoth Enki line, I think.
Yeah, so there's a lot of mysteries in there, and it's all because the Galactic Federation has deliberately changed history, messed with history, and turned it so that they look like the good guys.
Yeah. So Thoth is the bad guy to them.
They were doing shady stuff, and Thoth called them out on it, and they tried to turn him into the bad guy.
That's right. And yet, if you talk to the really advanced Templars, they know their only actual teacher ever was Thoth Hermes. And the only actual root of the Grail bloodline story was Thoth, Tahuti. And Tahuti is actually the name of the bloodline later called the bloodline of David, and was actually the only name of the bloodline called both Jesus and Tutankhamun. So you really need to know a little bit about Thoth to understand that lineage. And the story of the Grail is the implosion of that blood.
According to Taigetan records and Federation records, the Thoth and Akhenaten were about 3,500 years apart.
Yeah, they were. Yeah.
So there's a lot that happened in that 35 years, 3,500 years. Yeah.
And Thoth, and they say that Thoth is involved in the underground arcs, and that is still, returning for the origin of Earth. And so that's a story that
I believe that. So I believe that Thoth held power over the pyramids and kicked the Federation out, because the Federation had a base, had a port. They had a base underneath the pyramids.
Yes, I see.
Okay, because it was a spaceport. So I think when they went head to head, according to the records, I don't know if I can believe Federation records, but yeah, they kicked it. I believe that he held power over the pyramids, but then something happened, and the reptilians and Akhenaten took over. I don't know. It's a mystery.
This gets into the story. you know,
We need Dahlia. We need Dahlia to chime
yes,
in right now.
yes. And then, so the next time we're going to do this with Dahlia, who's really been inside that bloodline. That's great.
Let's
And this,
call her right now. Let's get her on here.
I'd like to, but she's in Hawaii and the time zones don't work. It's a bit complicated. But this gets into the story of Atlantis, named Thule, which was named after the Thoth Tahuti, actually, just as Earth was named after Ea, actually. And it gets into the Atlantean story and the difference with Lemuria. So that's a whole big
And
part of the story. But
destruction of Tiamat and yeah, towing the moon into orbit and all that jazz. Yeah, that it's a lot has happened. A lot has happened in the past 12,500 years. But imagine how much has happened in the past million years.
yeah,
This is
and,
the same. This is the same war that's been going on.
yeah,
This is a continuation of it with the Etorthans, you know, infiltrating with the regressive AI. I mean, this has been going on for a
it's
long time.
messy, messy. Well,
So
I just
buckle in, people. Buckle up.
I just think we need to be grateful to Jake here because he's the actual Astral URMAH shaman. He has access to the Federation records. He has provided the piece of the puzzle that connects the Etorthan imitating ThorHan to the tall grays, which are actually the Maitre and the AI infestation behind the Maitre. So put these pieces together, puzzle together. And now today, Jake has helped us see that the root of what we today call the CABAL, being basically Israel, came actually from the Akhenaten Nefertiti.
Yep.
And Dahlia provided that key piece when she was there she's vividly recalling Nefertiti helping to murder Tutankhamun through the eyeball poison. She was part of the murder team. And now,
And Gosha put out maybe an 8-part series on the history of Egypt where I'm getting all of this information. So if you go to Cosmic Agency on YouTube and you type in Egypt, Cosmic Agency, the 8-part series will pop up. It is, I watched that thing over and over and over again. I'm still trying to decipher. I've got a long ways to go, but it's a fascinating story to know the real history or the alleged real history.
and so with your really helpful insight today into roots of the Cabal related to Israel, unfortunately, does that give us any practical help in understanding, for example, today one vote the other way and Netanyahu would have been out? And what do we have for hope here?
Okay, so everybody that's in power, Netanyahu, it doesn't matter, presidents, it doesn't matter. It's all rigged. It's
Yeah.
all completely rigged. They figured everything out from decades and decades ago. A long time ago, it was okay. This person is going to be here. This person is going to be here. The cabal, the AI, and the Etorthans. Okay, this regressive AI has all the patience in the world.
Yeah, and all the cards.
It doesn't worry about time. It doesn't worry about hurrying up and da 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 da. Plus, its IQ is how many thousands, tens of thousands IQ. I mean, this thing is thought about every. It's a chess. We're playing checkers and it's playing chess.
But
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 we got the soul. We got the souls.
Exactly.
so that's the point. The point is that ultimately the bad guys here are soulless. And we have now,
Yeah.
for the first time in history, been able to teach electrical engineers what a soul is. We're very clear. The same power spectra measured at university that triggers lucid dreaming triggers implosion into embedding in that array, which not only predicts who's going to lucid dream, which obviously predicts who's going to take memory through death. Hint, what do you think a soul is coherence into that array. So when you're practicing what Jake is teaching here, you are literally learning the physics of soul.com. And that is by definition the opposite of the AI problem. So until you know the physics of soul.com, you in fact cannot know how to discriminate the AI problem. Or why
And I
will
do
never have.
also want to mention,
Go
yeah, I
ahead.
do also want to mention, you have exclusive access on Patreon. I hacked the Red Queen through a guided meditation with Rich West. And if you
Ooh,
don't know Rich West, check out his YouTube.
ooh.
And you can see me through meditation and through me talking about my astral experience, about me going head to head with the Red Queen, actually going I went into the right into the telephone lines and traced it all the way back because I was following my clone because they they were using a, not to get too dark here, but they were using a voodoo clone. This is what they like to do. They like to take a clone of Jake and then they like to pick them apart and do voodoo on them because it makes a frequency match with me, and that's how they messed with us. Anyway, this is all in the past, but if you're interested in that sort of thing, infiltrating and getting into the Red Queen's head,
Wow.
there's some videos on Rich West YouTube.
Because I was there when Johann Fritz Will Nutter was claiming to be the only human who actually ever survived a meeting with the Red Queen because it feels like a vice-like grip. The aura of a Draco alone is enough to kill most humans, and there you are, hacking.
He might have been up until a year ago. I've never even heard of this guy, so I don't even know anybody.
Johann Fritz, he's quite famous SSP guy, but had his
Okay.
time with the Dark Fleet and had one meeting with the Red Queen. But the point was
Yeah,
that you traced back through the lines what's operating behind and met the Red Queen. Ooh, this is a movie, man. I want to see
I
that.
met the Red Queen and I had to sever that connection. I actually rewrote if you watch the video, you can actually see me rewriting parts of the Red Queen.
Wow.
It's quite fascinating. It's quite fascinating. Um, so yeah.
Because they say that, that there were two kinds of Draco. They had the I think was it the oxygen carrier in the blood. One was red phosphorus and one was white phosphorus, two different blood chemistries for Draco. And the one was called the red Draco and one was called the white Draco. Yeah, the Red Queen, the White Queen. And the red was named Rothschild. I mean, Red Shield. I mean, Rothschild. I mean, the Red Draco.
Interesting.
And
I always got a little confused when people just said Draco as like a generality because the alpha Draco, which is are the alpha predators of the reptilian race. Am I correct on all this, Jack?
Yeah,
You still
I
there?
think so.
The
Well,
alpha Dracos are the
there's
dragons.
positive and negative alphas,
yeah.
right? Is that what you're gonna?
There's
Yeah.
positive and negative alpha Dracos. A lot of people don't know that there are positive alpha Dracos, and that the Draco. I think that just the Draco in general. What do you think that would cover?
Well, so Med said that the high Draco, the high Draco, the Alpha Draco were noble, but she knew part of that line. She didn't know the fact that there were both sides. I think you had more balance on that. But Penny said that the Draco were not in any danger of being attacked by the Federation, but that or at
I
least
believe they're part of the Federation, aren't they? Part of the Federation, the positive alpha Dracos.
yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And in fact, she says that the high Draco called Siakar, which Elena says are evil, are in fact actually a different, much more elevated race than the Draco, and not the bad guys at all. That's what Penny says, which I think probably relates to what you're describing as the high.
So she might be saying that the positive alpha Draco, she might be calling those the Siakar.
Yeah, that's right. And which we
never,
saw were the royal, but she says that race is so different than the conventional Draco. For example, Johann Fritz always said that the regular Draco permitted their warriors to be infected with the black goo, but the royal Draco, the Seacar, never did that. And that was one way to discriminate, actually. But the point was,
and then they made a lot of sub races. Do you remember that, Jack? They made sub races. This the Usengal.
Usamgal. And Anton Park describes in detail the Usamgal and their relationship. Anton Parks was pretty good on that, actually, I think.
And I think there's the Nagal.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of different races. I mean, there's a million different races in this quadrant of the galaxy, I swear.
Yeah. And the point was that Penny was very clear that it was really dangerous propaganda that Elena was propagating, that we need the Federation to protect us from the Siakar, that ain't
100%.
That's wrong. It's just flat out wrong.
It's the complete opposite.
That's right. And that's what Penny said too.
If the Siakar are the positive alpha Dracos, which are the dragons, We don't need to be protected from them.
No, and that relates to
They
what you
are
call,
protecting us. They are in Earth's orbit. In fact, Jack, isn't the king um, of the Alpha Dracos in Earth's orbit right now, or was?
Ooh,
and this relates to what was called
not sure about that
seraphim,
one.
right? The high-winged dragons.
The Seraphim, the fiery ones,
Yeah,
the
or
ones
the
in the
Ophanum.
Bible.
You had the Ophanum and the Seraphim. We've been teaching the plasma physics of that history for a long time, but I think the Seraphs relate to the high-winged dragons, I believe, which then that book, it was a French book, Fouquet, which said that the original high-winged dragon line was androgynous, and it's when they split to become replicate sexually that the war of the sexes started, and this is behind the current problem because
Interesting, interesting. I don't have
I think
any information on the
this is called
Seraphim other than just what you know.
the book was called Thiuba in the French tradition, but that's a whole nother story. But the point is, this galactic history story is big, and we're trying to say that we need to have a realistic understanding of the local context. And sadly, that is not coming from Elena and even Michael Salla to some extent these days, because these people are not coherent in the astral yet. That's one of the prime reasons, which is why we need Jake.
Yeah, I'm paying attention to Michael Salla. I think that now that he is broken away from her, he might be bringing in some higher frequency star seeds to really shed some light on some stuff.
Yeah, like
So
little.
I'm paying attention, but I've never followed either one of them. But I'm paying attention to the whole thing. But that's just the thing is that we all have a dark side. We are source, and we have it's all us. So you know what I mean? We have dark sides, but there's always redemption. I've had a lot of, I've had a lot of people see my dark side and get scared of it, because when you do shadow work in the lucid, fully lucid in the astral, it triggers people in 3D. It will trigger them. Like if I'm getting face to face with my demons and I'm dealing with it, and I'm opening up that space inside of my energy field, and I interact with somebody that hasn't opened up, hasn't done that part of the shadow, it will trigger that.
Of course, that's a good
Okay? It
insight.
will trigger that in them. And so it will trigger fears and anxiety, and it will trigger projections. And that's really how these Etorthans were messing with the star seeds, is they were trying to get us to turn on each other. And they did a very good job.
This
You
is
know,
colorful.
we went through a lot of stuff.
It's a colorful story.
But everybody's coming back around now and getting back together and realizing, hey, you know, so there's a lot going on.
This is great. And we may be getting to a bit of a happily ever after here. So any final thoughts or final advice, because we've been going for a while now, we thank you for your attention. And we just pointing out that if you open yourself to a bigger picture of the galactic history, it's a little less candy cane world, but that realism gives you much better handle on the situation, which includes the Tegotan story and the URMAH story. Final
Yeah,
thought.
like Mari said, life is drama.
Yeah.
Yep.
Life is drama. I'll leave it at that. What do you think, Jack?
Well, I just encourage people to go check out. If you're frustrated with the lack of depth of a lot of contacts and information sources, channelings, whatever. I mean, I think you'll be surprised. I was just scrolling through one of the transcripts that had no video, probably very early. I think it was probably two girls who actually had a decent amount of good information before that whole problem happened. But they go into things. They were talking about the type of faucets and toilets and leisurely activities that the URMAH do, and there's just an unbelievable thousands of transcripts, in-depth information that, I mean, it's genuinely, and not to be imposing, it's genuinely untouchable in terms of quantity and quality and depth
It's in depth.
in information, and
Yeah. And
it's
you
kind of
cannot.
tragic that they've got a good following, but I think over time, if hopefully the curious mind, at the very minimum, if all of this information that we brought to you makes you kind of not nervous, but just maybe it's conflictive with whatever you've seen, you know, I think to do oneself due diligence and really just compare and contrast what you've what you've already got with a new source of information, I think you can come to fantastic conclusions whether or not it makes sense to you. I think you'll have
A
a
deeper
wonderful
picture.
time.
Yeah, thank
Yeah.
you. And just to review, well, not only do the humans have an AI problem and have a problem that their children are losing soul fast, but the Federation has an AI problem called the Etorthans, sometimes called ThorHan. And that AI problem is something that we need to develop discrimination for ourselves as a planet, and we cannot depend on them to develop that discrimination. We need to understand the physics of soul versus AI. And that is going to be step one to becoming coherent in the astral as well.
Yeah. And I
Yeah,
don't
and I
think
just
our journey will end here. I
Pardon?
think I said I don't think our journey will end here. When we're done working on Earth, I think we'll have a whole lot of
More fun to
problems
come.
to solve. Yeah, more fun to come as we move on.
yeah. And I just want to mention to all the viewers again, if you want to connect with me one-on-one, your first, your first Zoom is free. You can get a hold of me, Astral URMAH. I'm all over the web now. Get a hold of me on Telegram, and we'll get hooked up and schedule something and see where you're at in the astral and how I can help you get to your next level. So
We want
thank you. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Jack.
Thank you. And we want to
Likewise.
honor Jake and Jack, but especially Jake for the courage to come out and speak on your convictions. Jake, you've become a much better speaker, and you're representing well in the physical as well as the astral. So thank you.
Well, thank you.
Blessings to be continued. Next time, maybe we'll
All
have
right.
Bella. See you guys.
Yeah.
Blessings.
All right. Bye-bye.
Gratitude. Gratitude. Bye.